Hello and welcome to Lessons in Marketing Excellence Season 4. I'm Sandeep Shrikant. India's biggest and most keenly contested B-School Challenge is in its final leg, the grand finale, where 3 teams will stake their claim to the top prize. These teams have been through a 6-month-long elimination process and competed with over 700 teams from business schools across India and the world to get here. They are IIM Bangalore, SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai, and for the first time in this series, we have an international team in the finale, London Business School. In keeping with tradition, the finalists have been thrown a challenge that will put their education and skills to use for the benefit of the nation. It deals with a very critical concern in urban India today, affordable housing. Vast stretches of slums like these, dotting our cityscapes, represent the acute shortage of affordable housing in India, which is pegged at around 19 million units as of 2012. India's urban population is projected to grow from 31% today to 40% by 2030, and this makes housing one of the most pressing needs faced by our cities. While availability of land at reasonable prices is the biggest barrier, developers are also reluctant to provide low-cost housing and instead prefer to cater to the upper class. So the challenge for the teams is: first, identify barriers that make developers reluctant to provide affordable housing units and offer them incentives for the same. Design a single-window online approval mechanism to cut costs and time overruns. Suggest a mid-path between self-regulation and the proposed real estate regulatory bill that developers say is draconian to protect consumers. Identify other stakeholders who can play a key role in providing affordable housing. Suggest alternative funding models to ensure sufficient financing is available to consumers and developers. Identify one city in India that could be made world-class or suggest the creation of a brand new city. And share the most relevant international example of how affordable housing has been provided. As you can see, the task was a mammoth one. The Power Pack finale in Mumbai on 26 February was presided over by the Union Cabinet Minister for Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, Ajay Markan, who outlined his vision for India's cities and the gravity of the challenge at hand.
On one hand, we are facing a shortage of 18.78 million houses, and on the other hand, having 10 to 11% of houses vacant, it shows that there is something wrong in the policy of the government and also the banks, because $67 billion is the gross credit deployment by the RBI in CRE housing sector. So I think the shortage is because of the wrong policy direction. We need to think what needs to be done. We also should think as to what the private developer should do. I am very excited to listen to the brightest young minds in our country and also from the London Business School. We'll listen to them, we'll see what they have to offer, and I'll take back with me what they have to offer. And I have also asked Anuradha if it is possible, maybe we can call some of them to Delhi before the Planning Commission officials, before our ministry officials, and tell us what needs to be done.
A final case study challenge that addresses an issue of national importance is one of the things that makes Lime unequivocal. And over the years, this convention has earned the recognition and admiration of students, society, and industry.
Everybody, whether it's students, TV programs, corporate entities, all of us need to come good for the society we live in. This idea clearly has resonated with people. In fact, Deepak Parekh of HDFC was here last year, and before he left last year, he had said, I'm going to give you the challenge for the next year. I said, okay, lovely. It makes our life a lot easier. So I want to say thank you to Mr. Parekh for giving us the topic today, to his team for helping us articulate it.
Also present at the grand event were some of India's most eminent business leaders, including prominent real estate developers and builders, a sign of just how much Lime has grown in scope and scale. In just 4 years, Hindustan Unilever's dedicated support to the cause of management education through this initiative has paid off. This is what the MD and CEO Nitin Paranjpe had to say.
Started with a desire among some of us in the company at that stage to say whether there was anything that we could do in a small way to try and contribute to sharpening some of the marketing skills that students in business school could develop. 3,400 teams which registered for this, over 10,000 students were registered for this event, and it gives you a sense of how aspirational, how prestigious an event like this has become.
The winner of Lime Season 4 will be picked by an eminent jury. We have Hemant Bakshi, Executive Director, Home and Personal Care, Hindustan Unilever; Anjali Tarapur from the country's leading housing finance company, HDFC; Pranay Vakil, the leading authority on the Indian real estate market and former chairman of Knight Frank India. He currently heads his own independent consultancy. And Niranjan Hiranandani of the Hiranandani Group, one of the country's foremost real estate developers and builders. The first team to present its solutions is IIM Bangalore. This team comes in all set to defend the institute's position as Lime champions. We'll have their presentation after a short break.
You probably draw a blank on who is in charge of your city.
Ensure that these houses are chosen by the people. How do you make a PPP model in the housing segment work? Actually lend it to people who can afford to buy the house. The conclusions you might draw might be misleading.
Can I please invite our first team up on stage, IIM Bangalore. And if you're ready, gentlemen, you'll have 5 minutes and your time starts now.
A warm good evening to one and all. In order to understand the actual problem with the urban housing shortage in our country, it becomes highly mandatory that a thorough situation study is done on 9 important pillars like urban housing shortage data analysis, study of objective, performance and challenges faced by key policy measures and also the key stakeholders, land regulations, success foreign models, expert committee reports, literatures on affordable housing and primary research. This study enabled us to identify the core issues and the associated root cause for the urban housing shortage in our country. With the learning from the situational study, we see a lot of positives. However, there is still some unaddressed challenges that serve as serious deterrents and there is still a great scope for improvement. We arrived at recommendations on 3 dimensions. Moving on. Dimension 1. Before we actually go for major changes, it is imperative to study why the existing policies didn't perform as expected. According to the Standing Committee Report on Urban Housing Shortage 2012, fund utilization rate of key policies is around 50% and target realization of most of the policies is around 40%. The main reasons cited for this below average performance are poor capacity building with the urban local bodies, lack of coordination among various implementing agencies, very weak financial position of ULBs and more importantly, lack of integration between the state and the center. So, until and unless this is fixed, it's really tough to realize the true potential of various measures. Hence, the need of the hour to bring about structural changes through capacity building of the ULB level, framework for end-to-end target setting and monitoring, and cross-linkages between the 2 ministries, MUED and MHUPA. So, how are we going to bring about the capacity building of the ULBs? Establish regional hub institutions and center of excellence in collaboration with IIMs and other central institutions for training the ULBs. The main skills that needs to be taught are accounting, government housing schemes, data collection techniques and computer skills. So, under the end-to-end framework for target setting and monitoring, the recommendation is to adapt the input, output and the outcome-based performance management and evaluation system that is already launched and tested rather than going for a new system. A list of improvements is also recommended by studying the PMES model of foreign countries. With the use of technology, the result framework document of the ULBs, state and the center has to be integrated. This system will facilitate to a greater degree in identification of the root cause behind each and every performance failure. In order to bring transparency, digital boards can be installed in the ULB office, capturing the performance percentage of that ULBs vis-a-vis the others. The second dimension of our recommendation is to have submissions that address each and every component of the shortage rather than employing the most appropriate model for the shortage than a macro policy. The main reasoning behind this recommendation is that the TG12 report on housing shortage brings out that the components of shortage are multidimensional like congested houses, obsolete houses and non-serviceable kacha. First, for this, we recommend a 4-pronged strategy. First prong, cooperative-based affordable housing for in-situ upgradation. Second prong, promoting large number of MFIs lending for innovative lease-based renting inferred from our field study. For this, we recommend to have separate fund allocation of around 5% to 8% for the MFIs under the ISHUP and the 2 million housing programs. The concept of self-help group can be used to connect the EEWS and the LIG through NGOs and the community-based organization. The third prong, PPP model with fund support from the government for new housing complexes and increased focus on the SRZs. Finally, on the fourth prong, special subsidy housing loans for EWS and LIG needs to be there. This requires a three-step reform. Step 1. Merge ISH UP 2 million housing program and Sabke Live Awas into two, that is EWS by LIG urban housing loan subsidy and rural loan subsidy. Step 2, the scope needs to be changed from supporting not only fresh construction but also for purchase and upgradation of the houses. Step 3, adopt successful models that has been implemented in foreign countries like inclusionary zoning, joint purchase of land with NGOs, density bonus and increased access to micro-mortgage products. Lastly, on the third dimension, we suggest a set of comprehensive improvements which will facilitate the aforementioned recommendations. Increased emphasis on counter-urbanization measure, FAR, FSI to be increased, stamp duty on the incremental value, wide deployment of REITs, ECBs and municipal bonds, and have a PPP model where people has the option to choose the house. Finally, long-term measure needs to be taken to make housing a fundamental right for every Indian. Thus, to conclude, our situational study on the 9 pillars led to the identification of the challenges currently faced, and we strongly believe that the recommended structural challenges, the 4-pronged policy reforms and the multidimensional improvements can provide the needed solution for our nation's affordable housing. Jai Hind.
Well done, Ian Bangalore. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's time for your Q&A session. So, Hemant, would you like to start?
The question in my mind was that have you talked to anyone who's seeking affordable housing? What is it that they want? What is it that they define as affordable housing? Because that might give us some solutions which may be out of the box, which we may not have thought of.
So when we actually talk to the people who actually need this affordable housing, if you look at the definitions that's given by the standing committee and the definition taken by the banks, it's all based on their income levels and the square feet of the area. But people actually look for things like infrastructure. Do they have water supply in that area? How long is the residence from the place they work? So all these needs to be taken into consideration while giving a definition for affordable housing.
Anjali, can we have a question from you, please?
What are your views on private developers having to mandatorily earmark a certain percentage of homes built for the EWS section?
That model where you get, they need to give a certain amount of land for EWS construction is currently not working, because we find that some developers actually they sit out the land, for example, so that they can make use of the appreciation which is present. So what generally we found a model which could work basically here is building only houses of say less than 300 square feet, which a premium consumer will not be willing to use it. So that is one self-check mechanism which we felt can be incorporated in lands being given by the government to private developers to develop such affordable housing projects.
Mr. Vakil?
I hope you recognize the fact that not every family in a town or a city is a buyer of a house. He might be wanting to rent one. Now, unless you split that into two parts, the conclusions you might draw might be misleading.
The TG report has mentioned around 11 million houses are vacant. So some incentive needs to be given so that the vacant houses get into the system. So our recommendation, what we actually observed in the field study is that have MFIs supporting the rent-based model through a lease-based renting. Let the tenant, rather than paying a monthly rent, sign a lease document with the owner and let the MFI straight away lend money to the house owner. And let this tenant pay the installments in the form of rent to the MFIs.
Well, let me interrupt you.
Sorry.
See, these are people who want to ultimately buy and therefore they are renting. So you address that group.
Yeah.
But there might be people just wanting to rent, not intending to buy.
So one of the things is that we found an interesting model called REITs. So where you break up the housing into equity shares and actually lend it to people who can afford to buy the house and have the people who need the affordable housing to live in it. So breaking the ownership and the residence apart. I think this could be a model which could solve this renting problem. People can pay rents which can be used as dividends to pay to the equity holders. So this way could be a sustainable financial model.
Mr. Hiranandani, can we have a question from you?
Yeah. PPP model that you talked about, what did you actually mean? How do you make a PPP model in the housing segment work for affordable housing?
To quote with taken the foreign models like from like Uganda in Kenya. So what we found there is that they pay the private developers upfront The main reason what the developers say in a PPP model is if I get the amount at the last, because of the cost of capital what I incur, the margin what I get is very less. Hence, I am not getting into the EWS LIG segment. In order to counter that, I have the money paid to the developer upfront and also ensure that these houses are chosen by the people, so that the quality of the housing is also taken care. And another point for that is that we have SEZs which are developed. So develop some special residential zones along with collaborating with the companies that are present in these SEZs, because they have the employee base who are looking for affordable housing. Collaborate with them, ask them to provide loans to their employees. Maybe the NHB can actually give the loans at a subsidized rate. So this way the industry and the public sector can come together to create the housing complexes.
Alright, so thank you judges. Thank you IIM Bangalore. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for IIM Bangalore.
Our questions on the transfer development rights and what the EWS and LIG segments want, and also in terms of the how the PPP model in this case will work. All these actually were questions I guess we answered pretty well.
You talked of upgradation of slums, but you haven't talked about eliminating slums completely.
But it cannot be done over a day. And more importantly, it cannot be done by giving them free houses. Tell me what can go wrong. There could be certain amount of corruption that we have to deal with.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now have the second team ready to make that presentation. SP Jain, Mumbai. So SP Jain, your 5 minutes start now.
A very good evening. Our vision is improving life by fulfilling the promise of urbanization. People come into cities with a dream of better income, shelter, education and health. Affordable housing consists of economic space and social infrastructure. Urbanization promises an improved life, and we propose to fulfill that promise.
EWS, LIG and lower MIG contribute to a shortage of 19 million households. 46% of them work in the unorganized sector and have little documentation of income or residence. They aspire for basic necessities like tenure, toilets and quality of life. Owing to the lack of documentation, financial institutions don't lend. Low profit margins and regulatory inaction deter developers from entering the market. Conflicting interests of different stakeholders lead to approval delays and create an artificial supply shortage.
The shortage forces people to live in illegal slums with no tenure or access to services. People get stuck in a poverty trap and find it impossible to realize the promise of urbanization. They need a stepping stone to improve and grow both socially and economically. The threshold for access to formal housing needs to be brought down. We propose the implementation of a 5-step ladder model. It allows each section of the society to move up the ladder, thereby solving the housing problems of a city over a period of time.
Step 1, addressing the slums. The weakest sections which cannot access formal housing will continue to live in slums. Slum upgradation, improved tenure and in situ rehabilitation will enable them to live better and earn more because of locational advantage. Step 2, organized renting. Mature slum dwellers can move up to organized renting. The government can subsidize them via direct transfers. The project can be in PPPs where government manages the rent for 12 years, after which the developer sells at market rates, making it viable for all.
Steps 3 and 4, low income and affordable housing. These steps give access to formal housing of rupees 3 to 10 lakhs. Both demand and supply issues exist and need to be addressed to unlock a 1.1 million crore opportunity. Micro mortgage will provide loans to people who can afford EMIs of up to rupees 5,000. Loans between 3 to 8 lakh rupees can be given at around 14%. New credit assessment methods is the key to unlock the huge opportunity in micro mortgage. Interacting with customers' relationship networks and collecting pre-EMIs will be a good test of their payback ability. Computerization of records, priority sector sub-targets for micro mortgages and waiver of fees are required to propel demand.
On the supply side, developers are aware of the market opportunity and are willing to operate with a manufacturing mindset. They are looking for a 25% margin with a focus on volumes. Town planning schemes create a win-win situation for all and make land available. 10% of the unused government land in cities could be freed for affordable housing.
It takes at least 12 months for getting all clearances. Pre-approval of clearances and simple checklists will ease the process. A single window must be implemented with strict time limits. We suggest an online clearance system on the lines of the MIDC. We recommend the setup of affordable housing centers to bring the supply and demand actors under one roof. Builders, micro-mortgage institutions, NGOs and customers can meet and engage in mutually beneficial activities.
Step 5, high-income housing. Effective densification of the main city improves economic efficiency. Rapid infrastructure growth, amendment in rent control and a gradual but blanket increase in FSI are recommended. As an effect of the ladder model, low-income houses should be set up in the periphery. This will enable a part of LIG to move out of the slums to better homes and have access to social infrastructure. MIG will be able to move up the ladder and access affordable homes in the middle regions of mixed zoning, while migrants could occupy houses in the periphery instead of slums. Changing FSI and rent control norms could lead to effective densification of the main city.
Mandatory registration of projects and advertisements will force the developer to be transparent. The Real Estate Regulatory Act must be passed to have a regulator with adjudicatory powers. To protect all stakeholders, the Act must ensure single window clearances and should make urban local bodies accountable for delays.
The current housing expenditure is less than 1% of the total union and state budget. Various schemes need to be streamlined with a target of developing 2.1 million homes every year. An annual budgetary allocation of rupees 9,900 crores is needed for 10 years to solve the urban housing problem.
Target-based accountability should be driven from the top. Clear action plans, annual meetings and progress reports should be made at each level ranging from the Union Ministry to affordable housing centers. In the long run, new cities need to be built by world-class planners to ease the burden. Industries and jobs should be pushed to new cities and they should be well connected to existing ones.
To conclude, the ladder model should be implemented with slum upgradation, organized renting and affordable housing centers. A regulator will ensure transparency among developers. Target-driven accountability from the top is imperative. 9,900 crores needs to be spent to support the building of 2.1 million homes each year. New cities must be planned to reduce the pressure on existing ones. These measures are key to fulfilling the promise of urbanization and thus improving life. Thank you.
Thank you, S.P. Jain. Right on time, and now it's time for the judges. Mr. Hiranandani, can we start with you?
You talked about the ladder model. What is it that actually works for the ladder model which you have found worthwhile or has been followed in any other place?
So the most important part of the ladder model is that it allows all sections of the society to move up. And more importantly, that's the way it gives access for the lower sections of the society, the EWS and the LIG, access to affordable homes. Some parts of this have been done in Gujarat. For example, the step 1 that we proposed, the slum upgradation, a program called Parivartan was run, where they were able to prove that it leads to an increase in the annual income of the household. Again, organized renting which is our step 2, has been practiced in certain parts of Maharashtra by MADA, and it has worked out successfully. Though certain tweaks are required in the way it is conducted.
Good.
Mr. Vakil, can we have a question from you?
What I like about your presentation is the pre-approval process, because that can cut down the delays. What I don't like about your presentation, really, is that you are assuming that the slums will continue, because that's your first step of the ladder. Whereas we and the government, we all want it to be completely slum-free.
What we've understood is that even the long-term objective of this plan is to make sure that nobody is living in the slum. But it cannot be done over a day. And more importantly, it cannot be done by giving them free houses. They have to earn and they have to buy a house themselves. They need to make sure that their interest lies in investing some part of their income in making a house for themselves. And that is the only way it will work. And for that reason, we are proposing the elimination of slums per se over a long period of time, over a medium range period of time, by the slum dwellers or the low income residents elevating themselves and fulfilling their dreams.
Anjali?
The issue that you raised about the real estate regulator. Now, there are two conflicting views. One is it would be good for the consumer because there'd be enhanced transparency. On the other hand, there is a point of view from the developers that says that it may be one more hindrance onto the entire approval process. What's your take on these two conflicting views?
What we have come to understand is that the Real Estate Regulatory Act as it stands today is very important for consumer protection, but has little to offer to the developers. The one way that we can find a middle path, we can find the middle ground, is by also giving the developers some incentives. So when the Regulatory Act is passed, single window clearances can be made almost mandatory or can be made a guidance for each city or each urban local body to implement. And this will definitely incentivize the builders and it will get the whole market going.
Hemant?
Yeah. I would like you to play devil's advocate to your own recommendation and tell me what can go wrong and why will they not work.
So firstly, scalability of micro mortgage institutions is the first thing we see that may go wrong. Secondly, we feel that interlinkages in the various departments in ensuring single window clearance may be a problem, and that may take some time. And so thirdly, we feel that
Actually, the third point, when we speak about target-driven accountability, it requires the entire country to be put into a framework which is led by the top. The top has a target of 2.1, and in each city there will be affordable housing centers which will have their individual targets. Now, when you want to run such a system in such a hierarchy, there could be dilutions, there could be certain amount of corruption that we have to deal with. So these could be certain risks or certain things that we need to be worried about when we are implementing the ladder model.
Thank you, judges. Thank you, SP Jain. Do I need to ask for a round of applause? Guys, you can head off stage now. Thank you.
One of the questions were that what would be the major things that could go wrong? What if this doesn't work? So we answered that pretty well, I think.
Every business school student is a type A personality who wants to win, so it is very important to win. But I think the bigger picture here is making a difference, and if we can do something that actually generates a policy change or some idea that we talk about here makes something that's a tangible difference in this country, that would mean a lot more.
Now it's time for our third team we're going to present today. And ladies and gentlemen, our final team is the first international B school to qualify for Lyme. And they're here on the stage, the grand finale stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the team from London Business School. Deepa and Hayum, if you're ready, again, you'll have 5 minutes to present. And your time starts now.
Sure, thank you. So the theme of our presentation was roofs and roots, and when we started looking at affordable housing, we figured it wasn't just putting a roof over a family, but more about building community where families can settle down and put down roots and come together. So to start off, I'm going to try and not talk too much about the issue, which I think the minister articulated very well, and the other teams must have already spoken about it twice. But the invisible hand that Adam Smith talks about, saying free markets can solve all problems, I think we all agree it needs a definite helping hand from policy on this side. And within the base of the pyramid, there's actually another pyramid, which means that there is diversity in demand, but it also means there is space for the market to play and come up with a market solution. So when we look at the supply side issues where we want policy intervention to come in, there are issues all along the supply chain, starting from consumer demand all the way to the sale process, where we either have demand for homogeneous communities or we have issues in credit rating people who don't have salaries. But the key issues actually come in the middle of the pipeline, where there's the maximum number of externalities involved. So there's a lot of issues in initial financing where the cost of funds for all the developers is very high. This results in hurdle rates for projects going up to 30-33%, and there's a need for permitting, possibly external commercial borrowing. The land acquisition process with its associated lack of transparency is probably a barrier for pretty much every project, not just affordable housing. And if we look at the government approvals, it's just another reason for delays and disincentives. The country we love to benchmark ourselves against is China, and they require 6 approvals for starting any building, and we need 34. And I think that's an area where those are numbers which kind of shocked us when we looked at it, with India ranking 181 out of 183 countries, which is not a number to be proud of. And construction costs, again, are typically the largest cost item for the developer, all of which naturally push development towards the premium end of the spectrum, and a reason why affordable housing is not something that people want to play in. So we started looking at solutions, and we were very tempted to look at it as something that's just builders, financial institutions, and developers providing housing. But what we realized, it's actually a larger web which has entertainment, amenities, social amenities, public infrastructure, water, sewage, etc., education, employment opportunities, and a whole variety of other stakeholders who kind of come together to build the community. So at a time when the country is going through a lot of change, there's infrastructure provision and projects running all around, housing is a part of the puzzle that needs to be fitted into the overall solution. The other thing that we wanted to do was think about it a little differently, look at partnerships that we can create, new public-private or private-private partnerships, think about ways we can disrupt the existing business model, and also how do we engage with the consumers. Being part of LBS was actually an advantage here for us to try and hear success stories from around the world when we met people who've worked in this space.
And there were understanding that we got from projects from countries which are both developed and developing, but which still have similar market barriers, from countries like Rwanda, where we learned about anchoring the housing through employers, the need for community-led design. There's a project in Tokyo which talked about how cost of acquisition is not the only issue, there's also cost of ownership. The closer to home, there have been successful projects in Pakistan which taught us about site selection based on infrastructure connections to the place of employment, and award-winning designs from Mexico which talk about how allowing homeowners to stage investment into the property. That kind of told us that we need to look at a three-pronged approach. One would be to standardize as many elements as possible, increase predictability in the process, look at sustainable localization, involve the community starting from design all the way to delivery, and create solutions that are focused at the long run. It's not just building houses for now, it's about building something that does not impact the environment in the long run. And also about creating systematic incentives which will move factors of production, to bring another economic term, from where we are today to where it's actually required, move them into the affordable housing space. So these gave us 5 different things that we thought would kickstart the change, and Hayun will take us through those.
First of all, designing a much discussed single window scheme. Instead of treating all the different projects the same, we differentiated approach based on the level of risk should be considered. To make this approach truly benefit affordable housing project, new ways such as standardized construction technique or certification system to identify reliable developers should be also discussed. They will bring much more clarity in forecasting and assessing the risk involving in building the affordable houses. Then this approach should be clearly communicated across the stakeholder and leads to structure an effective single window approval without overlapping the checks. Secondly, moving construction off-site can help houses be built faster at lower cost with improved quality. It's a standardized modular prefabrication system can be used over many projects, offsetting higher initial investment. At the same time, it will also create a new prefab construction industry and opportunity to increase skilled employees in India. Thirdly, considering the income of our target and the scale of the project, just delivering affordable houses won't be enough. Use of sustainable energy, green strategy, and innovative local material will reduce the maintenance cost and potential impact of the construction industry on environment, but also encourage innovation in India. And also, while improving the quality of houses and project management, developer and government should invest in improving their brand at a national level to enhance their images amongst the consumer. Finally, our target population varies tremendously. There will be no silver bullet, unfortunately. Different type of housing solutions should be devised according to each group's need. Therefore, involving end consumer throughout the process will be critical to success. In terms of public and private relationship in inner urban area, strong government leadership is still needed due to high cost of rent. Also, alternative solutions such as rental houses or home improvement models should be considered to make inclusive society. For sub and peri-urban area, government can be an enabler by providing infrastructure and creating a business-friendly environment. Here, private sector can form new partnerships among themselves, for instance, to offer new job opportunity as well as better lifestyle with improved houses. So all in all, these 5 initiatives
We need to ask you to wrap up.
Can increase the supply of affordable housing in India by empowering the buyer, incentivizing developer, streamlining policy, engaging community, and stimulating innovation. Thank you.
Judges, Hemant, can I start with you?
When I look at your solution, I'm not being able to pick up why this would be a win-win for all the stakeholders. And it almost seems like, it'll work for some and not work for all. So tell me, how did you build that into your solution?
I think creating an incentive structure that makes it win-win for everybody is the challenge that would have to be addressed as the first step. So we know that the system right now, there is no incentive for employers, for example, if you have an industrial cluster outside the city, for an association there to start maybe housing starts for their employees. But that's a place where we think the government has a role to play in creating maybe tax incentives. So right now, we agree with you, it is not a win-win for everybody, but that is the structure that needs to be put in place.
Anjali, can we have your question?
The question I wanted to really raise is that, ultimately leadership plays a very important role in governance and efficiency in an institution, and the same should be the case with a city. Now, you all have the experience of having looked at international cities where you see the mayors. I mean, we have celebrity mayors like a Boris Johnson or a Michael Bloomberg. They are the CEOs of the city. They're responsible for the city. Do you think empowering a mayor or a CEO of a city would help make Indian cities more livable?
We absolutely agree with that. And first of all, to make these ideas and all the initiatives happen, the strong leadership from government is critical. And the Boris Johnson, we are a big fan of him, by the way. So he is the brilliant communicator and marketer of all the government plan in London and across the UK. So he proved that kind of strong and charming leadership even from the government can benefit implementing new policies and improving their lives of the people.
Well, congratulations and my compliments to you sitting out there to try and fathom the problems that we have, which we ourselves are struggling to find solutions to. What I don't understand is to what extent you had your ear to the ground, because our problems are a little different from what the rest of the world is facing. The sheer numbers that we are talking about, right? Or the disparities that we are talking about. Now these are so alarming, so large, that unless you think out of box, you may not be able to come up with a solution that's applicable to India.
We actually found it pretty easy to reach out to people here. So in terms of having our ear on the ground, it was very easy to engage with people who are actually working in the affordable housing space, who are working with micro, working with working with developers, financing developers. The challenge that we did have was that I think being remote, we didn't have access to the consumer perspective to understand firsthand from people who are looking for houses what are the challenges that they face. The flip side to it is being away from it. I think we could afford to have the out-of-box thinking. We weren't limited by the fact that, okay, but we can never really have renewable energy in an apartment here. It's not something that is done. And I think being part of a community there which worked on markets that were similar helped.
Mr. Hiranandani, can we have the final question from you?
I wanted to understand the two models which you talk about thinking differently, and you talked about Barclays and the City of London creating partnerships. How is that applicable here, and to what extent can you explain that example? One, and the other one is the IKEA EasyZ Amigo, which example which you have given in terms of disrupting the business model. How is that case and different or applicable to us?
Barclay example was hugely successful by Boris Johnson mayor. He has been cycling on a Barclay bike every day, and he was featured on the media. So this is the one example where how private and public sector can work together.
So I think the second part of the question was about IKEA and Amigo loans, and that was thinking about how we want to change the business model. IKEA is known as a furniture company, but they also sell modular homes, so you could technically just buy a house from IKEA and assemble it. And Amigo Loans is a payday lender. Their approach to credit assessing is something where they look at if you can get a guarantor, you can get a loan. And the issue with making loans to people who are not salaried, where the larger financial institutions can't really step in right now, is creating a credit rating model. And something like this would be an innovation, and from what we've heard in conversations we've had, people are using different indicators to come up with credit assessments, like how often do you recharge your cell phone to understand how much money do you actually make in a month. So those are ways by which the traditional business model of give me your pay slip, give me 4 months worth of bank statements is not necessarily the way to go in terms of thinking about assessing risk or assessing credit.
Thank you so much, London Business School. Ladies and gentlemen, some international perspectives from the team from LBS. We're going to give our jury some time to put their thoughts together and score the teams.
much more enjoyable than I expected, and the questions were really sharp and interesting, and the old idea kind of resonated well with juries as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, in second place, our runners-up this evening, can I please request the Honourable Minister, Mr. Ajay Makhan, Anuradha Sengupta and Hemant Bakshi to please come up on stage to give away the prizes. Ladies and gentlemen, we have lots of prizes to give away for all three teams. The second runners-up win a cash prize of 1 lakh rupees. The runners-up have a cash prize of 2 lakh rupees, and of course, the big winners tonight take home a cash prize of 6 lakh rupees, and each member gets a pre-placement interview with Hindustan Unilever. In third place today, a commendable achievement. Can we have the team from London Business School come up? Round of applause for them. Hi Emily, Deepa Balakrishnan, thank you so much. Alright, that means we have two teams who've been here before, two teams who've displayed the pedigree season after season online. Ladies and gentlemen, in second place, our runners-up this evening, the defending champions from IIM Bangalore. And that, of course, means that SPJIMR have won Live Season 4. IIM Bangalore, can we have you up on stage? Ladies and gentlemen, the big winners, SPJIMR.
I think what SPJN did very well was to really look at the problem in a very segmented way. So they didn't have one solution which fit everyone, every part of the society. They had different ways in which to handle the solution. So I think that was good. I also think that this simplified the problem a lot.
SPJN, they're walking away with the grand prize, and as you heard from the audience response, they were very, very popular and deserving winners. And with that, we come to the end of Season 4 of Lessons in Marketing Excellence. On behalf of the entire team at CNBC TV 18, thank you so much for watching. Teams 2 for just a little bit more. The team's over there, and there was Professor Inta Kabir sitting at her table over there. The big winners, SPJIMR.
It feels awesome to have won the Lime Grand Finale.
Since we all have pre-placement interviews with Unilever, Hindustan Unilever, I think the next step would be to work towards cracking that interview. The last round especially was a lot of hard work, and I'm really happy that we won this.
And I'm just speechless. I don't know what to do.